The ice stretched to the horizon like a frozen ocean of white, broken only by pressure ridges that rose like frozen waves against the pale Arctic sky. For thousands of years, this landscape had sustained the greatest land predator on Earth. The ice was life itself, a hunting platform, a highway, a kingdom of cold that belonged to the polar bear. But the kingdom is melting. Beneath the surface, currents warmed by distant climate systems eat away at ice that once seemed eternal. Each summer arrives earlier. Each winter freezes later. The hunting season that polar bears depend upon shrinks by approximately 3 weeks every decade, and the consequences cascade through a species that evolution never prepared for warmth. A female polar bear stands at the edge of open water, where solid ice should extend for miles. Her ribs pressed visibly against fur that once covered layers of life-sustaining fat. Behind her, 2 cubs of the year huddle together, their small bodies burning calories they cannot replace. Their survival depending on a mother who has not eaten successfully in over 4 months. She must hunt. She must find seals on ice that increasingly does not exist. She must succeed where the mathematics of a warming world have stacked every odd against her. Tonight, we journey to the top of the world to witness a crisis unfolding in slow motion. We follow the desperate hunts of bears pushed to the edge of survival by changes they did not cause and cannot escape. We examine the science behind their decline and the futures that different warming scenarios promise. This is the polar apocalypse, and for the starving giants of the Arctic, every hunt may be the last. Over the course of approximately 600,000 years, this species diverged from brown bear ancestors to become the undisputed apex predator of the Arctic marine ecosystem. Adult male polar bears rank among the largest land carnivores on Earth. Weights typically range from 770 to 1,500 pounds, with exceptional individuals exceeding 1,700 pounds. Standing on hind legs, large males can reach heights of over 10 feet, a physical presence that no other Arctic predator can challenge. Females, while considerably smaller at 330 to 650 pounds, possess the endurance and hunting skills that determine population survival. Their ability to successfully raise cubs through the harsh Arctic environment ultimately controls whether polar bear numbers grow, stabilize, or decline. Every aspect of polar bear physiology reflects adaptation to cold. Their fur, which appears white, but actually consists of transparent hollow hairs over black skin, provides insulation so effective that bears can overheat during physical exertion, even in sub-zero temperatures. Their feet, spanning up to 12 inches in diameter, function as snowshoes on soft surfaces and paddles in open water. Small papillae on the foot pads provide grip on slippery ice. Partially webbed toes enhance swimming efficiency in an animal that may travel 60 miles or more across open water when necessary. But the adaptation that defines polar bear existence is their complete dependence on sea ice as a hunting platform. Polar bears evolved to hunt marine mammals, primarily ringed seals and bearded seals. From the frozen surface of Arctic waters, they wait at breathing holes where seals must surface. They stalk across ice floes to approach hauled-out prey. They use the ice as the foundation for every aspect of their predatory lifestyle. Without ice, polar bears cannot hunt effectively. Without hunting, polar bears cannot survive, and the ice is disappearing. The Arctic sea ice that polar bears depend upon has declined dramatically over the past 4 decades. Satellite measurements that began in 1979 document a transformation that has fundamentally altered the Arctic environment. But extent measurements capture only part of the story. Ice thickness has declined even more dramatically than coverage area. Multi-year ice, the thick accumulated ice that survives multiple melt seasons, has decreased by approximately 40%. The ice that remains is increasingly young, thin, and vulnerable to melting. The timing of freeze and thaw has shifted in ways that directly impact polar bear survival. In Hudson Bay, one of the most studied polar bear populations, the ice-freeze season has lengthened by approximately 3 weeks compared to the 1980s. Bears that once had 8 months of hunting opportunity now have closer to 7. Those missing weeks matter enormously. Polar bears accumulate the majority of their annual calories during the spring seal hunting season, when ringed seal pups are born in snow dens on the ice. These inexperienced young seals provide the highest hunting success rates of the year. Bears that miss even a portion of this critical window enter the ice-free summer with reduced fat reserves. The consequences compound across the fasting season. Bears that cannot hunt must survive on stored body fat, losing approximately 2 pounds per day during summer and fall. A bear that begins the fast with depleted reserves may not survive until freeze-up returns. A mother with cubs faces even greater challenges, burning calories to produce milk while simultaneously maintaining her own survival. Each year of reduced ice means more bears entering winter in compromised condition. Each compromised winter means reduced reproduction, reduced cub survival, and reduced population stability. The mathematics of Arctic warming have turned against the polar bear. She knows this frozen landscape as intimately as any creature can know its home. But this year has brought challenges beyond even her experience. The ice broke up 3 weeks earlier than she had ever witnessed. The seals she depends upon dispersed into open water before she could accumulate sufficient fat reserves. She entered the ice-free season carrying perhaps half the weight she needed, her body already beginning to consume itself before the true fasting months arrived. Her cubs were born the previous winter, in a snow den, where she fasted for nearly 4 months while nursing them through their first vulnerable weeks. They emerged in spring as small, dependent creatures requiring her milk and protection for at least 2 more years. They represent enormous biological investment that she cannot afford to lose. But feeding them is killing her. Every calorie she converts to milk depletes reserves she cannot replace. Every day they survive brings her closer to a threshold beyond which recovery becomes impossible. The evolutionary imperative to nurture her offspring conflicts with the biological reality that dead mothers produce no future cubs. She has begun hunting with increasing desperation. She spends hours at breathing holes that seals no longer use. She stalks holdout seals across ice too thin to support her approach without cracking and alerting her prey. She expends precious calories on hunts that produce nothing but exhaustion. Her cubs follow, learning hunting behaviors they may never successfully employ. They watch their mother fail repeatedly, absorbing lessons about a world where the skills that sustained generations of ancestors no longer guarantee survival. The family's situation grows more critical with each passing day. The mother's condition deteriorates visibly. The cub's growth has slowed as milk production declines. The outcome toward which they are heading becomes increasingly difficult to avoid. Without a successful hunt soon, none of them will survive the winter. Polar bear hunting success rates have always been relatively low compared to many predators. Even under optimal conditions, bears typically succeed in only about 2% of seal hunting attempts. They are adapted for this low success rate. Their massive bodies, capable of storing enough energy from occasional large kills to sustain extended periods without food. But optimal conditions increasingly do not exist. Bears in regions with the greatest ice loss show hunting success rates that have declined by 30% or more. They expend more energy per successful hunt, traveling farther across fragmented ice to reach hunting opportunities that prove increasingly futile. The hunt we witness unfolds across hours of patient waiting that produce no result. The female is located a breathing hole in a section of remaining ice. She positions herself downwind, her white fur blending with the frozen surface. She waits with the stillness that only bears can achieve, every sense focused on the small circle of dark water that represents her only hope. Hours pass. The cubs, too young to understand the stakes, grow restless and must be silenced with low growls. The female's concentration never wavers. She has done this countless times before. She knows that patience eventually produces prey, but the seal does not come. The breathing hole has been abandoned, its user having moved to other locations as ice conditions changed. The female has invested hours of waiting on a position that was doomed from the start. She has burned calories she could not afford to burn, waiting for an opportunity that never existed. She rises and moves on, her cubs following, their small legs struggling to match her pace across the broken ice. Somewhere ahead, there must be seals. There have always been seals. The Arctic has always provided for those strong and skilled enough to take what it offers. But the Arctic itself is changing, and the old certainties no longer hold. The individual tragedy we witness reflects a species-wide crisis that scientists have documented across the polar bear's circumpolar range. The declining populations share common characteristics. They occupy regions where sea ice loss has been most severe. They demonstrate reduced body condition scores compared to historical measurements. They show declining reproduction rates and reduced cub survival. The Western Hudson Bay population, one of the most thoroughly studied, illustrates the pattern clearly. In the 1980s, this population numbered approximately 1,200 individuals. Current estimates place the population closer to 800, a decline of approximately 1/3 in 4 decades. More troubling than the numbers are the underlying vital rates. Female body condition at the end of summer, which directly predicts reproductive success, has declined significantly. The average age of first reproduction has increased, as females require additional years to accumulate sufficient body reserves. Litter sizes have decreased. Cub survival rates have fallen. Climate projections suggest that the conditions driving these declines will intensify throughout the 21st century. Under high-emission scenarios, the Arctic could experience ice-free summers within decades. Under moderate scenarios, the ice-free season will continue lengthening, reducing hunting opportunity further each year. Some researchers project that polar bears could decline by 30% by 2050 under current emission trajectories. Others suggest that certain populations face functional extinction well before that date. The most vulnerable bears, those in the southernmost parts of the range where ice loss is most advanced, may serve as previews of challenges that all populations will eventually face. The polar bear evolved to dominate a world of ice. What happens when that world no longer exists? Polar bears have demonstrated remarkable behavioral flexibility in response to changing conditions. Researchers have documented novel behaviors that suggest bears are attempting to adapt to their transformed environment. Some bears have increased their use of terrestrial food sources during extended ice-free periods. They consume berries, grasses, bird eggs, and caribou carcasses that would have been irrelevant to their ancestors. They raid seabird colonies, swimming to islands where nesting birds provide accessible if limited calories. Others have shifted their hunting strategies. They target different seal species. They exploit different ice formations. They travel greater distances to reach remaining productive areas. They demonstrate the cognitive flexibility that allowed their ancestors to colonize the Arctic in the first place. But flexibility has limits. The fundamental problem is energetic. Polar bears require a diet dominated by fat-rich marine mammals to maintain their massive bodies and support reproduction. The alternative foods they can access on land simply do not provide sufficient caloric density. A bear eating berries burns more energy gathering the food than the food provides. A bear eating bird eggs must consume unrealistic quantities to meet daily requirements. Studies comparing the body condition of bears using terrestrial food sources versus those with continued ice access demonstrate the difference clearly. Land-based feeding does not maintain body condition. It merely slows the rate of decline during fasting periods that have become too long for any behavioral adaptation to overcome. Swimming represents another apparent adaptation that carries hidden costs. Polar bears swimming between ice floes or to reach remaining ice platforms expend enormous energy. Cubs, swimming with their mother's face, elevated drowning risk, particularly when distances exceed their endurance. The very behavior that appears adaptive may actually accelerate decline in some circumstances. The species evolved for a specific ecological niche. That niche is shrinking faster than evolutionary adaptation can possibly respond. Behavioral flexibility may buy time for some individuals, but it cannot substitute for the ice-based hunting platform that polar bear biology requires. The future of polar bears depends largely on choices that humans will make in coming decades. Climate projections offer multiple scenarios ranging from severe to catastrophic, and polar bear fate tracks closely with which scenario actually unfolds. Under aggressive emissions reduction consistent with Paris Agreement targets, Arctic warming could be limited to levels that preserve substantial sea ice habitat. Polar bear populations would decline but potentially stabilize at reduced levels. Some populations, particularly those in the highest Arctic, might maintain viable numbers indefinitely. Under current trajectory scenarios, with emissions continuing near present levels, ice loss will accelerate through mid-century before beginning to stabilize at dramatically reduced levels. Polar bear populations would face severe declines, with southern populations potentially facing extinction while northern populations struggle to persist. Under high-emission scenarios, where fossil fuel use continues increasing, the Arctic could become essentially ice-free during summers before the end of this century. Such conditions would likely prove incompatible with polar bear survival outside of captive populations. Conservation efforts currently focus on reducing human-caused mortality to give populations maximum resilience for whatever climate future unfolds. Restricting harvest, reducing human-bear conflict, and protecting critical habitat areas all contribute to this effort. But these measures address symptoms rather than the underlying cause. The bears themselves cannot lobby for emissions reductions. They cannot advocate for policy changes. They can only continue doing what polar bears have always done: hunting seals on ice, raising cubs through harsh winters, surviving by the skills and strength that evolution provided. Those skills and that strength have sustained polar bears through previous climate variations. But the pace and magnitude of current changes exceed anything in the species' evolutionary experience. The sun hangs low on the horizon, casting long shadows across ice that should be solid but breaks treacherously beneath heavy footfalls. The female has traveled over 30 miles in the past days, her cubs struggling to keep pace, their reserves depleting with every step. She has found a seal. It rests on an ice floe barely large enough to support its bulk, seemingly unaware of the predator approaching across the fragmented surface. The female moves with the exquisite patience of her kind, each step placed deliberately, her body lowering as she closes distance. The cubs wait behind, having learned that their presence during final approach guarantees failure. They watch their mother become a white shadow against the white ice, her focus absolute, her hunger directing every movement toward the prey that represents their only hope. The final rush happens almost too fast to follow. The female explodes from her stalking crouch, covering the final distance in a burst of desperate speed. The ice beneath her cracks, but holds long enough. Her jaws close on the seal before it can reach the water. She has succeeded. The kill is not large, but it is sufficient. The fat-rich blubber will restore some of what months of starvation have consumed. Her milk production will increase. Her cubs will grow. The family will survive this crisis, if not the larger one that continues building around them. She feeds her cubs first, as polar bear mothers do. She watches them tear into the blubber with the enthusiasm of creatures who have finally found what their bodies desperately need. For this moment, in T's plays, the ancient compact between polar bear and Arctic has been honored, but the ice continues to shrink. The seasons continue to shift. The world that made this moment possible continues to change in ways that will make such moments increasingly rare, until finally they cease altogether. Tonight, a polar bear family survives. Tomorrow is uncertain, and the apocalypse that is transforming their world continues its slow, inexorable advance. This has been Wildlife Rescue Stories. Thank you for joining us at the top of the world, where the consequences of global choices play out in the lives of creatures who cannot escape them. The ice is melting, the giants are starving, and the hunt continues. For as long as the ice remains,